It started like any other quiet afternoon until the unthinkable happened. A medical emergency inside my own home turned into a nightmare, not because help didn't come, but because it was stopped at the door. I was having trouble breathing, and my partner did the right thing. He called 911 immediately. Within minutes, paramedics arrived, ready to do their job. But they were met with something none of us ever expected: the neighborhood HOA. A security guard at the gate, acting under the HOA's policy, refused to let them in without proper clearance. Those precious minutes that could have saved a life, were spent arguing, waiting, and making phone calls. Meanwhile, inside, I was slipping away. This wasn't just red tape. This wasn't just some annoying neighborhood rule. This was life and death. And by the time they finally got through, it was too late. What followed was heartbreak, outrage, and a legal battle that would shake the entire community. Because someone had to answer for what happened, and that someone wasn't who you might expect. The HOA's decision didn't just delay medical help, it led to a manslaughter charge. But how did it get to that point? Who really held the power that day, and who failed to use it? Let me take you back to where it all began. Our neighborhood looked perfect from the outside: neatly trimmed lawns, quiet streets, and a security gate that gave a false sense of safety. The HOA ran everything with strict rules, from the color of your mailbox to how long a guest could park on your driveway. It always felt a bit much, but no one ever thought it could turn dangerous. That day, when I collapsed in the living room, gasping for air, my partner panicked, but he acted fast. The 911 operator said help was on the way. We believed that meant I'd be okay. What we didn't know was that help would get stuck just a few feet from our front door. The guard at the front gate said the paramedics needed prior approval to enter. He claimed it was policy, that he couldn't make an exception without HOA permission. They argued back and forth as my partner screamed through the phone for someone, anyone, to just let them through. But nobody budged. A decision made in a booth by someone who didn't even know my name was about to cost everything. Neighbors started to gather, watching but unsure what to do. Firms were out, some recording. Whispers spread, but no one could break the rules. And inside, time kept ticking, while my life slowly slipped away. The moments after the paramedics were finally let in felt like a blur. I remember flashes, faces hovering above me, the sound of the stretcher being wheeled in, the desperate urgency in their voices. But mostly, I remember the silence that followed, the kind that sinks into the walls and lingers. My partner sat on the floor, shaking, while a neighbor whispered that it should have never come to this. And they were right. The HOA wasn't just enforcing a rule, they were deciding who got help and who didn't. In the days after, the neighborhood became a pressure cooker. Some people defended the HOA, saying rules are rules, and the guard was just doing his job. Others were furious, demanding accountability. Local news got involved, and suddenly, our quiet little gated community became the center of a national conversation. Was it just poor judgment, or did someone's decision cross a legal line? Meanwhile, the HOA board stayed quiet. No apology, no public statement, just lawyers. Behind closed doors, neighbors whispered about past incidents, times when emergency services were delayed for similar reasons, but nothing ever came of it. It was a pattern no one wanted to admit. Then came the call that changed everything. Law enforcement had launched an investigation, and someone on that board was about to face a manslaughter charge. As the investigation dragged on, the tension in the neighborhood reached a breaking point. Conversations turned from casual chatter to heated debates in every corner. Some believed the HOA had overstepped, while others doubled down, insisting the guard had no choice but to follow the rules. But one thing was clear: no one felt safe anymore. The very people who were supposed to protect us had become the source of our fear. The question hanging in the air was no longer about rules, it was about responsibility. Who should be held accountable when a life is at stake behind closed doors? The HOA board remained tight-lipped. They hired high-priced lawyers, hoping the scandal would blow over. But it didn't. The pressure mounted from every side: the media, the public, and even the families of others who had experienced delays and emergencies. There were whispers of other instances, other people who had suffered because of the same policies, but nothing concrete, just a vague sense that something was deeply wrong. Then, a breakthrough. The investigation revealed something that no one expected: a recording. It was from the guard's bodycam. The footage was damning. It showed the exact moment when he refused to let the paramedics in, and the chilling calm in his voice as he quoted that HOA's policy. But what it revealed even more painfully was the hesitation in his actions. He knew what he was doing wasn't right, yet he still followed orders. With the footage in the hands of the authorities, the pressure on the HOA board intensified. The news stations picked up on it, and every minute brought us closer to something I didn't want to imagine. Something that could change everything. The clock was ticking. Just when it seemed like the investigation was about to bring the truth to light, another shock hit. A second, previously unknown piece of footage emerged. This time, it wasn't from the guard's bodycam. It was from a neighbor's phone. The neighbor, a quiet woman who lived down the street, had been recording when the paramedics were initially stopped. But what was revealed in her video wasn't just more of the same, it was far worse. In the background, you could hear the voices of the paramedics, pleading for access. But what the camera caught next sent a ripple through the entire investigation. A board member of the HOA, someone high up in the organization, was standing at the gate, speaking directly to the security guard. The conversation wasn't about policy. It wasn't about clearance. It was about control. The board member could be heard telling the guard to hold them off as long as possible, and let's make sure they don't get in until we hear back from the higher-ups. That small detail, hidden in plain sight, turned everything upside down. It wasn't just the guard following orders anymore. The people in charge were involved, and they had knowingly allowed someone's life to slip through their fingers. This wasn't just bureaucracy. This was a conscious decision. With this new footage now in the hands of the authorities, the situation exploded. Suddenly, the investigation wasn't just about a moment of poor judgment. It was about potential conspiracy, about those in power making choices that could lead to far worse consequences than anyone had initially realized. The stakes were higher than ever, and now the entire HOA board was under scrutiny. Could they cover this up? Would they face charges? The answers were coming, but they were becoming even more dangerous. The tension in the neighborhood grew to unbearable levels as everyone waited for the inevitable collapse. The pressure on the HOA board finally reached a breaking point. Law enforcement moved quickly, and within days, the district attorney filed formal charges. The charge was manslaughter, not just against the security guard, but against the board member caught on tape. The community, once divided, now seemed united in shock. People who had defended the HOA were now questioning everything. How could this happen in a place that promised safety and security? How had a policy, intended to control access to a neighborhood, led to the death of a person? The courtroom drama that followed was intense. The footage from both the guard's bodycam and the neighbor's phone was played over and over. The defense tried to spin the narrative, claiming the guard had acted in good faith and had only followed orders. But the board member's words, caught so clearly on camera, told a different story. The prosecutor painted a picture of a callous disregard for human life, of people who had allowed a man to die for the sake of maintaining control. When the verdict came down, it wasn't what anyone expected. The board member was found guilty. But it wasn't just a legal sentence that hit hardest. It was the revelation that came after the trial. In the final moments of the court proceedings, as the judge delivered the sentence, a letter was handed to the defense attorney. It was from a previous board member, someone who had resigned months earlier. The letter contained shocking details about the HOA's history, instances of delayed emergency responses, ignored protocols, and a long-standing pattern of putting policy above people's well-being. The letter also stated that the board had been warned before about the dangers of their system, but they chose to ignore it. The twist: the person who had resigned, the whistleblower, was none other than the very same security guard who had been at the gate that day. He had been trying to expose what was happening behind the scenes. But by the time he realized how deep the corruption went, it was already too late. In the end, the court wasn't just a place for justice, it became the final chapter of a much darker story, one that had unfolded behind the gated walls of our own homes. As the community began to heal, one question lingered: how many other